Hey, welcome to Connect Group, everybody, and I'm sure you're having a great night already. We're hoping that these next 20 minutes, as we watch a video together and talk about the content and be inspired by the content, will help us to be all that God has called us to be. You know, in a few weeks' time, we're going to be hosting the Global Leadership Summit. The Global Leadership Summit is a video cast event that goes over 122 countries all over the world and involves around 400,000 people. Different leaders from different backgrounds from all over the world will share their experience, share their skill and their knowledge, and inspire us and challenge us, and it's our privilege to be part of that here in Aberdeen. Bill Hybels is going to talk a little bit about Joshua, where we've been going through in these last few weeks, and how he's going to encourage us that each one of us is going to need great courage to become who God has made us to be. As we watch the 20-minute video together, I hope that you can tune in to that challenge to all of us, that we would take great courage to become and be who God has called us to be. Great watching, and we'll look forward to seeing you at the Global Leadership Summit.
In one of the most critical leadership transition in ancient times, a seasoned leader looked at his successor right in the eye and says to this younger leader, "Be strong and courageous. God himself will guide you and be with you. He will never leave you or forsake you. Do not be afraid. Do not get discouraged." The younger leader says thanks to the aging, outgoing leader, but as he quietly leaves the palace, he's secretly wondering why this new job is going to require all this courage and fortitude. Did he miss some fine print in his new job description? A short time later, God himself speaks to this newly appointed young leader and says very similar words. "Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid, for I am with you and I will never forsake you." Now the young leader's head is spinning, his heart is racing. What about my new job is going to be so courage intensive? Why am I being double warned about fear and discouragement? Why is it so terribly important that I know that God is going to stay close by and never abandon me? But within a matter of months, this young leader, whose name was Joshua, he would learn what every single woman and man who steps into the leadership role discovers within days of donning the mantle, that leadership demands a non-stop flow of fortitude from day one until the leader's final day. They learn that leadership is not for the faint of heart, and that without God's help, the job of a leader is almost impossible to sustain over the long haul. Which is why I want to talk to you very candidly and from my heart about the courage leadership requires. These days, we don't have to look very far for an example of courageous leadership, because the whole world has been reflecting on the bravery of Nelson Mandela as he lies in the hospital in Pretoria, South Africa, slowly awaiting his death. Mandela was arrested at 44 years of age for courageously speaking out against the evils of apartheid. Others stayed silent. He could not and would not. He sustained a courageous spirit of absolute defiance in the prison cell he would live in for the next 27 years. I've stood in that cell on Robben Island. When he was eventually elected the president of South Africa, he courageously implemented the Truth and Reconciliation Commission to keep his country from imploding. One of my all-time favorite Mandela quotes came at the infamous Rivonia trial, when he said that ending apartheid was a cause he was fully prepared to fight for every remaining day of his life. And if need be, he said, it is a cause for which I am fully prepared to die. A cause for which I am fully prepared to die. I would call that courage. Is it any wonder why Mandela inspired millions to join his cause and left a legacy of courage for future generations of leaders to aspire to? In the next few moments, I want to build a case for the fact that courage, old-fashioned fortitude and bravery, correlates to every single component of leadership. Every one. And because vision has and always will be the most potent offensive weapon in the leader's arsenal, let's start with it and see how critical courage is to vision. Vision, as you know, I've described it to you many times in the past, Vision is a picture of the future that creates passion in people. A picture of the future that creates passion in people. In recent years, I've been reminding you, God didn't make you a leader so that you could merely preside over something, or so that you could protect your position, or so that you could pontificate to others how smart you are. God made you a leader. Remember, I've drawn this the last several years, to move people from here to where? To there. To move people from here to there. To make people so discontent about the way things are, to build that logical, airtight case. We cannot stay here. And then when you've convinced them of that, then you say, we can, with God's help, go there. And then you describe how wonderful, how magnificent, how fantastic it's going to be when you go there. Now, it looks so easy when I just walk up to a flip chart and draw that line. Every veteran leader I know could show you the ugly battle scars from moving people from here to there. It requires far more courage than onlookers could ever imagine. Now, our most recent journey at Willow Creek, moving people from here to there, involved the construction on our campus of our new care center, which was completed and opened a few months ago. This ministry provides food and clothing distribution, legal aid, job training, dental and optometry services, a ministry that fixes cars for single moms. Now, these ministries used to be spread out in industrial areas very far away from our church. They were kind of out of sight, out of mind. And we thought it was time to bring them all home to our campus and accentuate them and grow them. Now, on the face of it, such a construction initiative shouldn't have required unusual levels of bravery, except for the fact that our elders made the decision to move ahead with this construction project in the heart of the deepest recession of our lifetimes. Now, their reasoning was flawless from a theological perspective. The recession was causing enormous suffering for the poor who live within 30 minutes of our church. So if we take the teachings of Jesus seriously, we should step out in faith and offer additional help to people who were suffering and couldn't feed their families. That's all good, except for that tiny little detail that we needed to raise the money from a congregation who was being badly battered by the very same recession. Hundreds of Willow people had lost their cars, had lost their jobs, had lost their homes. And how can I say this diplomatically? No one at Willow was really in the mood for a $10 million fundraiser on top of a $30 million annual operating budget that we were $2 million behind at the time. And I'll never forget the night before I was asked to walk on this stage and to stand in this exact spot to announce that exciting and very expensive building program to our congregation. I was praying Joshua's prayer on my knees in my home. Be strong and courageous. Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. God is with you. He will never forsake you. I needed a fresh infusion of courage that day, and God, by His grace, granted it to me, and I stood right here and cast that vision to our congregation. Now, what made this Care Center challenge even more interesting, I say this parenthetically, is that the leadership team I had assembled to build the building happened to all be women. Now, we've believed in women in leadership since day one at Willow, but when these fired up women who called themselves the Fabulous Five, I had other names for them. I kept that in my head. But when they would meet with me throughout this project to make changes to the building or try to add another 10,000 square feet to the project, I'd have to pray on my knees again. Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Would you want to tussle with a group of women called the Fab Five? No. Over the course of the 3-year Care Center construction project, we experienced in a very unique way God being with us, like the verse says. We actually saw and felt God move supernaturally. I believe He was rewarding our courage and our collective faith. In fact, the entire $10 million was raised in record time The entire building was paid for in full before we broke ground. This was the first time in 38 years that had ever happened. I don't know that it'll ever happen again. When we opened up that building, it was one of the most memorable weekends in the history of our church. I want to show you just a couple of pictures of it before I move on and make a very important point. First, you'll see a picture of the exterior. It's connected right to our building. We wanted to make it as welcoming as we possibly could. On the inside of the building, we made a lot of lobby space because before this, gang, when people came to our care center, they stood in 6 inches of snow in the wintertime without proper coats or boots, no bathrooms, little kids shivering out in the cold. When I talked to our congregation about the building of this building, and then I took them back from here to there, I would stand right here and say to the congregation, it's just not right that we treat hungry people with such lack of dignity. It's not right to have 150 people stand in the line in the cold. It's not right. We can do better. We should do better. And I kept building that vision of we can't stay here. And I would show pictures of that new, beautiful lobby with restrooms and warmth and all that kind of stuff. And the church got fired up. We used to just hand out bags of groceries. And we said, that's not right either. Let's do a full choice grocery store. Full choice. There's dignity in choice instead of just being given a bag. And then we added a clothing boutique. And we said, let's all take our gently used clothing or buy new clothing for kids and let's make it available. We can do this. And our church has responded unbelievably. We added dental suites because there's a lot of people in our area without any health insurance. And so dentists come and volunteer their time. It's a really cool deal. Optometry services. And then as you've heard me talk about in summits past, we have this really cool cars ministry where we challenge all the more affluent people in our church, if they don't absolutely have to have the trade-in value of their car when they're going to replace it, to donate it to the church. Our volunteer mechanics fix whatever needs fixing, and then we place it in the hands of a single mom. It's life-changing, absolutely life-changing to someone who needs transportation and can't get it, for their church to offer them such a solution. And so we put all those ministries together and built that building. One of the celebration days, we gathered our congregation in the parking lot. And that's actually thousands of people from our congregation. That's a helicopter shot. And those are just, again, thousands of people. Every significant vision that God births in you is going to put your courage to the test. You can count on this. Every time a leader attempts to move people from here to there, the leader knows deep down in their heart that a certain percentage of the people are going to resist moving. They're going to say, I don't care how cool the vision is, how many people it helps, I'm not going. The leader knows that another group of people are going to have a wait-and-see attitude, and they're going to need persuasion over time. And every leader knows how ugly it would be to move an effort, a cause, or a group of people halfway and then not be able to finish the job. And so that paralyzes a lot of leaders with fear. Every vision tests the mettle of every leader. So guess what lots of leaders do when they get a cool and challenging vision from God? They abort the vision secretly. No kidding. They kill it off quietly without telling anybody about it. This happens all the time. Who's ever going to know? Fear grips the leader. So to play it safe, they FedEx that cool vision back to God, and they say, no thanks, God, too risky. Send it to some other idiot. See how she does. See how he does. Don't send it to me. Too risky. Gang, I live with the deep-seated conviction that throughout history, our gracious God has sent extremely cool visions to leaders all over the world. Visions that would launch exciting businesses, that would employ hundreds of people. Visions that would end human trafficking, that would increase food production so no one would have to go to bed hungry. Visions that would provide clean drinking water for everyone in the world. Visions that would root corruption out of government. Visions that would end racial and ethnic violence. I believe to my toes that God has sent millions of cool, life-enhancing visions to leaders, young and old, all over the world, only to have those visions snuffed out because a leader thought the cost might be too high or the potential for failure might be too great. But you see, no one knows that all these cool visions are being aborted. These deaths occur behind a veil of secrecy and silence. So in my view, when we look at a violent and suffering world, and we all watch the news every night, I think we have a decision to make on where to lay the blame. Should we lay the blame at the feet of a compassionate God who has been sending life-enhancing visions to millions of leaders all over the world? Or should we lay the blame at the feet of a large number of gutless, cowardly leaders who aborted the misery-alleviating visions that God would have blessed wildly had there been the leadership courage to give them birth? Let me push this even further. I would bet a lot of someone else's money that a high percentage of you listening to me right now have an extremely cool vision hidden somewhere within you. A vision so cool that if you knew it would succeed, you'd drop everything and pursue it today. Might be the vision to start a new business venture or to take the one you run in a new direction. It might be the vision to start a new kind of church or a cool new non-for-profit or a vision to reform an arm of government. Truth be told, your pulse rate increases every time you think about it. It's just that you lack one thing: basic bravery, old-fashioned courage. And gang, I get it. I've been paralyzed by fear far more times than I would ever care to admit. And I have beaten myself up mercilessly for being cowardly throughout my leadership career. But then, there comes that day, in my case anyway, when I realize I got to live with myself. And I got to stand before God someday. And so I have to sort of grab hold of myself and say the words that God said to young Joshua. And I got to personalize them. Be strong and courageous, Bill. What are you thinking? Be strong and courageous. Do not fear. God himself is with you. He will never forsake you. And then I got to take that vision out of hiding. I've got to talk to some trusted friends about it. I got to get some feedback. And when the time is right, I have to step out in faith despite the fact that I'm vibrating with fear. And I just have to trust that God is going to help me achieve it in his power, in his strength, and for his glory. Gang, it's why God made us leaders. It's not to sit and suck air here. It's to step out in faith and move something or someone all the way to there, despite our fear. But gang, don't go to your grave with cool visions shriveling up and dying inside of you. Don't be that leader. Don't die a coward. One day, shortly after our care center opened, I rode my motorcycle over one night and sat in front of the new care center, just watched people going in and out, was praying and just looking at the miracle God had done. And a woman in a beat-up minivan with about 5 kids in the back pulled up right next to me. She recognized me. She walked over and said quietly with a very heavy accent, "Pastor Bill, thanks for this incredible place. Right now, it's our family's only hope. It's our family's only hope." Then she left to go get some groceries for all those kids. I sat out on the motorcycle and thought about her words. Our new care center was her family's only hope in this world. And then I thought of how close I had come to killing that vision before I had breathed a word of it to anybody. And I would have killed it because I was afraid we couldn't raise the money in tough economic times. And I'll tell you, I bawled half the way home. What a colossal tragedy that fear-induced abortion would have been. Leaders, visions are holy commodities. They come from our transcendent God. Treat them with the utmost respect. And for God's sake and the world's sake too, don't just kill them off in a late night fit of cowardliness. Get on your knees and say the Joshua prayer as many times as you need to say it. Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. God will be with you and will not forsake you. Then get up off your knees, put one foot in front of the other, and walk in faith toward the launch of that vision. Deal?